Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Amy Christine, a master of wine, co-owner of Holus Bolus Winery, the Joy Fantastic, and creator of the bold and joyful new wine label, Wine Slut. She's also a passionate educator, guiding corporate tastings for Chief Wine Officer and teaching Wine and Spirits Education Trust certification courses for wine professionals through Fine Vintage Limited. Amy's also a former actor, a writer, a massive Prince fan, a lover of chocolate, and bad reality TV. And she brings the kind of passion and perspective that will make this conversation one to savor. Amy, welcome to Expressions of Leadership. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm blushing whenever people talk about me or list accomplishments. I literally start like I'm a blusher. So forgive my red face.
You look great. Now, Amy, you've called your entry into wine and winemaking an accidental pathway. Can you expand upon that? And what did your journey into the wine world look like?
I think it's like the number one question I get asked in the tasting room is, how did you get here? Or how did you start a winery? And sometimes I have to go back to the very beginning, which was that I had no intention of ever starting a winery. It was the farthest thing from my mind. I didn't have even my first alcoholic beverage until I was 21 years old. I did not drink I drank in college after that, after I was like 21, but I was a bit buttoned up when it came to alcohol, and I always wanted to be I always wanted to be an actress. I went to performing arts high school in Georgia, and then went on to kind of study theater after college, and founded a small theater in Atlanta actually, and that's where I thought I would like make my mark in the world. And then I moved out to LA with a boy. That boy is long gone, thank goodness. Moved out to LA with a boy to be an actor. And then if you're an actor, you have to work in restaurants. And I was finding myself, you know, um, working in restaurants every night without a lot of passion. And so I was interested in wine, and I thought, well, why don't I go ahead and study a little bit about wine? Maybe I can become a wine buyer. Maybe I can kind of take the next step in my restaurant career, so to speak, if I just start studying wine. And I'm also a bit of a nerd. I just like to study things for the sake of studying things. And when I kind of started taking that path, it's how I met my husband. When I was interested in going up, I was working at a restaurant called AOC at the time, and I was interested in tasting and going to Santa Barbara and tasting the wines of Santa Barbara, and with some of the producers that we carried. And I walked to Stoltman Winery, which is where my husband was the assistant winemaker. He's very cute now. He's very, very cute. And I thought, oh my God, that guy is so cute. Maybe I'll marry that guy. It was like the first kind of thought that I had when I saw him, which is kind of weird. But then like we started dating and 6 months go by, and suddenly, and that was in January, suddenly it's time for harvest again. And we have this idea that we'll start a small winery, which we did. We made our first vintage kind of in the corners of Stoltman Winery, and it just kind of blossomed from there. And so it was really, the accident was the falling in love part of it. I think the romance part of it, which led to the professional side of my life. I don't know that most people fall in love and it changes their professional careers. Maybe that does happen a lot.
Yeah, I don't know, but hey, it happened to you, and obviously
It
it
happened
was
to me.
a wonderful, happy accident. And as you said, you began your career as a performer, working in theater and acting. What leadership qualities did you develop on stage that still show up in how you lead teams or guide clients or make decisions in the wine world today?
Part of what that experience taught me was just to be a good listener. If I can be a listener, to hear what people have to say. When people, for instance, like you were talking about leading clients, when I have a guest come into the tasting room, I will ask them what they like. It's up for me to listen to what they like and to provide them with that, with an experience that matches their preferences instead of me needing to sell. Let's say somebody loves Pinot Noir, but I need to sell Syrah. Like it's best that I listen to them that they want Pinot Noir and not that I try to push Syrah on them. I feel like, on stage when somebody is talking, in order to not get ahead of yourself and to have a conversation with someone when you're like in a scene, you have to act like it's the first time you've ever had that conversation. So it's important to kind of sit back and to listen to what the other person's saying without thinking about what you're going to say next. Have you ever, I know this is, all of us have had this. Have you ever been talking to somebody and you can tell they're not hearing what you're saying? They're just thinking about the next words that they're going to say to you. I try really hard in my life to not be thinking about the next thing I'm going to say, even if it means that I never get to say the thing that I want to say next, assuming that it will just kind of find its way there. So I feel like the listening part of it is what, I don't know, makes me a good leader with my clients at the very least. Sometimes people will come into the tasting room and they will say, we like big, bold, 16% alcohol wine. And I send them to another tasting room. Like my job is to listen to them and to say, "Well, this is actually not the place for you. Like I'm not going to provide you with a good experience, but this other place will." And it's taught me to like let go of business or what I perceive to be business in order to like find the people um, that want to be consuming our wine, if that makes sense.
And what about your employees?
So there's something else that I'm pretty good at, and it's reading the temperature of the room. And I feel like that also comes from acting and working with other actors because creative people can be sensitive, I guess. So with my employees, sometimes what I have found is that they will tell me something, but I have to read between the lines of what they're trying to say. And that's like maybe the most important thing is to get away from what's on the surface of what they're saying and to try to figure out, even if it's something like, hey, I really need a day off on Wednesday. But it's cool. I can totally work if you really want me to work. I kind of need the day off. And it's like, well, if they need the day off, then they just need the day off. And I have to take that in instead of saying, oh, no, I really need you to work or whatever the example might be, is just to like try to look at what's underlying what their motivations are underlying and what their needs are as people and not just as employees.
One thing I always say is that it's really important that we treat people like human beings, not human doings. So often when we're in workplaces, it's all about production, it's all about performance. And so we think about them doing things all the time, but we forget that there's a person behind that action. So we want to remember that they are, in fact, human beings, not human doings.
Yeah, no, that's a good lesson for me. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, many people have also heard of sommeliers, but fewer people, I would say, understand what it means to be a master of wine. Can you share what the Master of Wine program is and what drew you to take on such an intense and prestigious challenge?
Yeah, so I am a master of wine. A lot of people will refer to me as a master sommelier because of the movies, the Somm movies that I think have made the MS. I just think part more of the zeitgeist of. I mean, even non-wine people will know what a master sommelier is. But a master of wine is someone who has passed the Master of Wine exam. The Master of Wine exam is given by an organization called the Institute of Masters of Wine, which is a trade organization in the wine business. It is not a university. It is not an academic organization. It's a credential in wine, and not actually only in fine wine, but like in all wine. The exam is 4 days. You blind taste 36 wines over 3 days, and then in the after that's in the morning, and then in the afternoons you write essays. There's 13 essays over 4 days, and you have to write on viticulture, on winemaking, on quality assurance and quality control, or the handling of wine. So, like if Peter and I were going to buy a wine in bulk in Italy, how would we get that wine to the United States? You would have to write an essay on something like that. Also, the business of wine or contemporary issues. And it is a it is a really rigorous exam, mostly because the tasting exam, which we call the practical exam, the wines are getting better and better in the world. It's much harder and homogenized. It's much harder to tell the difference, as you know, because you're a wine person, Michelle, to tell the difference between a Pinot Noir from Australia and one from Sonoma, right? It's not always easy to distinguish those, but if you're going to pass the MW exam, you have to be able to do that. So it is such a grind and it is such a marathon. It is a really hard exam to pass. I took it on because I think I was a little bored in my life, to be quite honest. I felt like I had stagnated a little bit. I was working in restaurants, I was acting, I had met Peter. This was 2005. I applied to the program on a complete whim. Nobody knew what the Institute of Masters of Wine was in the US. I mean, very few people. I should say it's a UK based organization. It is worldwide. There's MWs all over the world, but you know the organization is in London. So when I applied, I would never be accepted today if I applied with my credentials. Then it was kind of on a lark. I think I got in because no one else applied. And early on in the program, it was there was maybe 20 of us at they do seminars every year just for a week to kind of indoctrinate you as a student and to do mock exams. And I just found a real camaraderie there. I love learning now, but I think when I was younger, I was even hungry. I was very hungry just to learn and to learn more about wine. It meant a lot to me personally. I also tell people that want to apply for the program, if you want to get into the MW program, you can't do it because you want to get a raise or you want more followers on your social account. You will never get through the exam. I had like a drive. It was like a personal goal for reasons. I don't know, Michelle, have you ever done anything that you're not sure why you did it? You just had like something in you just said, I should do this. That's what the MW program was for me. I just thought I have to do this. It seemed like it was like climbing Mount Everest. Now still to this day, like passing the exam, the tasting exam in particular, there's an 8 to 15% pass rate every year. It is so low that to pass, it felt like an impossible mountain to climb and one that I had to do it.
That journey to becoming a master of wine is, as you described, quite rigorous academically, but also physically and emotionally. How did that experience shape your leadership while you were in the program, or now that you're one of the very few who have achieved that distinction of Master of Wine?
Yeah, okay, so it actually had like passing the MW had a direct correlation to me being able to take chances. I think I took a real chance on the MW program and it allowed me to want to take risks with our business that like my husband is very risk averse. I became less risk averse when I thought, oh my gosh, if I put everything into something, if I do commit myself, like with my time, my emotions, the physicality, everything that you just said, then I think that we can come out successful on the other side. But the other thing that happened is shortly after I passed, there is the residential seminar that I was telling you about. It takes place 4 or 5 places in the world. I'm not exactly sure now how many places it is, but the U.S. version of this residential seminar, where students come to learn from other MWs and to practice, it's 1 week a year, and it takes place in Napa. And shortly after I passed the seminar, we call it the seminar coordinator. He retired, and someone said, "Amy, do you want to take this over?" I mean, I was a brand new MW. But I didn't. Of course, I did. Yeah, I want to take over all of this, and I t- what I took on my shoulders as a young MW, and a woman too in this, was pretty intense. And you don't get paid; you get like it's $1,000 honorarium or something like that. It was really just about me organizing other MWs, organizing students. I mean, it is a year-long process to organize and try to define this seminar, but wrangling other masters of wine and students and trying to find the correct wines to go on the mock exams and the correct theory sessions to do in the afternoon. Maybe I have to wrangle winemakers from Sonoma to come in and talk about malolactic fermentation. I don't know. Leading this program gave me confidence that I could be a leader, that people would listen to what I had to say, that actually I had something to say and I had something to share. I don't honestly know before the MW program that I felt that way about myself. I always said, like, I just want to be an employee. I don't want to lead a team. But the MW program and leading that seminar taught me that I could be a leader and that people would accept me as a leader. You know, it's one thing. This is another thing. Do you ever meet somebody and they tell you that they run a company and you're with them for 10 minutes and you're like, how does this person is insufferable? Like, how does this person lead teams? How do they do this? Like, I didn't want to be that type of leader. I wanted to be a leader that people wanted to help, wanted to support. I didn't want to be the leader that just told everybody what to do. I wanted to build a team for the seminar, and I think I did a really good job at it. I stayed on at it for 4 years, and COVID kind of hit around that time, so I stayed an extra year. But it was an incredible experience for me to be a leader.
And now looking back, how do those early experiences performing and studying and working in restaurants all weave together into the leader that you've become today?
Okay, so when I was on stage and you realize, for instance, that you flub a line, there is maybe no one there to save you or to pick you up. When Peter and I started our winery and our business and something goes bad for a year, there is no one to save you or to pick you up. And all of those experiences gave me the confidence to know that I could pick myself up. Like, I didn't have to turn to somebody else and say, I mean, you, of course, or you know who to turn to or the right people to ask for help. I also was not particularly good at asking for help. I was embarrassed. And I think you can't go through the MW program without asking for help. It's absolutely impossible. You also can't be a collaborator as a performer and not ask for help. So I think, having confidence to build myself up, but also finding the right people to pull in sometimes when you're sinking. Like, Peter and I are having a little moment in our business right now that is difficult, and we've had to find the right people to turn to. And I do think it's because I've had to build teams through the MW program and also, for our business.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll explore how Amy went from restaurant floors to owning a vineyard and launching three distinct labels. Stay with us. Leadership isn't just about strategy, it's about people. The Forward Project helps organizations cultivate strong, adaptable leaders who create thriving workplace cultures. If you're ready to invest in your leadership team, visit www.theforwardproject.co to learn how. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry, here with Master of Wine and winemaker Amy Christine, whose accidental path has become a delicious calling. Now, Amy, when you met your husband, he was working at Stoltman, as you said. What made you two decide to build a life and a business together?
We went on a hike just around harvest. I guess we had been together about 7 months. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to make really affordable wine. And I mean, wines that sold for $15 a bottle. Peter, working for Stoltman at the time, they were making, wines that were more expensive because they were wines that were from a vineyard that costs a lot to farm. He was also working with some other brands that were selling for $50 or $60 a bottle. And Peter and I just saw an opportunity to make wines that were really good at a $15 price point. So we started with a wine called Hocus Pocus. So it kind of had this fun name to it. And the idea was to bring wine to the masses, so to speak. And the first vintage of Hocus Pocus, Peter and I didn't actually make the wine. Our idea was to be what we call negociants in the wine business, which is to go to various wineries, taste barrels of finished wine, blend it, bottle it, and sell it. We Peter, we didn't have a winery space for this. Tom Stoltman was letting us make some wine in the winery, but they didn't have much space. So we didn't want to, overstay our welcome there. So we thought if we bought finished wine and blended it, we could get it out to the market for a really good price. And so the path to doing business was going to be being a negociant. But then what happens is you start seeing, depending on, the wine business goes into like booms and busts. And so some years there would be great bulk wine on the market, and other years there wouldn't be much bulk wine that was any good at all. So then you start buying grapes, and then you start making wine. And this led to, oh, we should make wine that costs a little bit more, and we should try to make more money, and we should try to pay ourselves off of this, which we didn't for the first, oh my God, Michelle, 17 years. I didn't get paid for the first 17 years of our winery, if you can imagine that. I had another job in LA the whole time with a with two different French wine importers. And it was finally by like taking a risk, like Peter and I decided to take a risk and to open a tasting room, that we were able to transfer like all, like we were wholesale. The margins on wholesale are not great. We were able to say, okay, if we sold this much wine direct to consumer through a tasting room, including the expenses of the tasting room and all of that, how long would it take us to be able to make money and to pay ourselves? And the answer to that is about, for me, it was about, after we opened a tasting room, I quit my job after about 3.5 years. So it was a really long road from meeting into our original concept of the business to what the business is now, to where we planted a vineyard. I mean, we were never even going to buy grapes to make wine. And then 10 years later, we're planting a vineyard. I mean, that is bananas. That isn't, that is like, I really don't know how we got there, besides just like baby steps all along the way, and an opportunity, right? To say, oh, we have these grapes that we want to make, and then that wine's good and it turns out to be successful, and that leads you to the next thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a 21-year journey together that has had a lot of shapes over the years.
And what did those early days teach you about resilience and creative leadership?
I never wanted to like follow the wine path that a lot of other people did, meaning that like I'll put, actually, Stoltman is a great example of how they've changed too. So Stoltman Vineyards, all their wines in the beginning were just called Stoltman, right? So you would see Stoltman Vineyards on the shelf, and I had the creative part of me wanted to create. We now have 8 different labels. Sometimes people come into the tasting room and go, "I don't know what your brand is," and isn't that confusing for people? And to me, it's like, oh, I mean, it might be confusing for people, but it's fun for me, right? I'm following my heart. Stoltman has done this really interesting thing to where they're not only Stoltman now, but they've developed another brand called So Fresh that's like younger and hip. It's very like young and hip. And I want to follow those paths of like making wine for different types of people. That's the creative part of this for me, is not just the winemaking, but this sounds dumb. Like, labels are important. Do you know how many people come into the tasting room and say, I buy wine because of what the label looks like? That is like creative. And though we don't design our labels, I know what I want in a label, and I can pass that on we have a great label designer who takes mine and Peter's ideas and actually, turns it into something. But that to me is like as important as what we're putting in the bottle. I think what's on the outside, what's on the label, if somebody's not paying attention to the label, what's on the inside of the wine is not going to be great. And what's on the inside of the bottle isn't going to be great.
And you bought a vineyard with Peter, and there's this romantic fantasy around winery ownership. And then, of course, there are the realities of farming and weather and labor. What are the key leadership learnings from your experience no one tells you about?
Can I just give everyone a piece of advice? Is never plant a vineyard. Can we just start there? First of all, outside of leadership, I think that because I'm going to get there, but I think that so we didn't buy a vineyard. We took a 30-year lease on 5 acres off of Sweeney Canyon Road. Because in order to buy land in Santa Barbara County, it's only sold in 100-acre plots. You have to have some money. Well, Peter and I didn't have that money. So we took this long-term lease. We planted this vineyard, and there were other people that looked to us at the time, like to get to leadership, to say, how did you do this? What varieties did you plant in that area? We had people coming to us to say, I want to do what you're doing. I want to plant a vineyard. At the time, Peter and I were more than happy to share all of that. We still are, all of the financials around planting a vineyard, and just the financials are what we would call bad, is the only term I can say for what it is to kind of to plant a vineyard. But I hope that we weren't trying to do this, but we could have been leaders for other small wineries that wanted to plant a vineyard in our area where we are in the southwestern corner of Santa Rita Hills. We are basically the only husband and wife team that owns and that is planted and tried to grow grapes there. Everyone else around us is a billionaire or 100 millionaire or a 20 millionaire, whatever it might be. It is not what we are. So I hope that we were some of the first to be able to like get out there and to do that. But our vineyard is now plagued with a disease called Pierce's disease, and it's dying. So we are walking away from our vineyard this year. So it's been really sad. I think part of when I think about being a leader and I'm leading our business now, my business is just me and Peter. Like, can you be a leader in a 2-person company? I hope so. I think I am. I'm actually the one that kind of drives our decisions. Peter wanted to plant the vineyard. I drove the decision to say, it is time to call it. I think you have to know when to dive in, and I think you have to know when to get out. I know when to get out, and getting out is now. So my position of leadership now is saying, no more money. No, we're not dumping any more money into this. We're going to try to like reconfigure our business to just purchase grapes now from other growers. Let the other growers take the risk of growing grapes and us to make wine from it. And that was really, the day we made that decision was really sad, but it was really powerful. Like, we realized that we have some control over our destiny and our financial destiny. I mean, why let this dream that we had bleed us dry? You have to know when to quit as well.
So you mentioned that he wanted to replant. You said, I don't think that's a good idea. And you've also said that you aren't a fan of conflict. So how do you and Peter navigate decisions when you don't agree?
Well, I mean, you're married, Michelle. Marriage is just one long negotiation, right? Just like a business. And I think early on, and Peter and I get along really well. So I think if you're going to work with your spouse, that's important. Some people say, "Oh my God, I hear this all the time too. I could never work with my spouse. We would fight like cats and dogs." Where that's just not our dynamic generally. Like, we don't fight like that. So in business, when we talk about things, one of the things that I've realized is that I can't approach my husband with an idea at 7:30 at night when we're watching Below Deck, right? This is a bad time to turn to him and say, I think we should hire somebody for this person, like, because that's going to create a conflict. He's going to go, why are we talking about this right now? So I have to temper myself because I'm chatty. I want to talk about stuff all the time. I've had to realize that there's like a good time to bring up certain subjects and a not good time to bring up certain subjects. I've also learned Peter's style of communicating is to immediately say no. So I will, like, let's take the tasting room, for instance. In 2016, I said, let's open a tasting room. Peter's like, nope, who's going to work it? How are we going to do this? It's too much money. And so I said, okay. 2017, I said, I've been talking to some friends. They think winemaking friends. They think a tasting room would be successful. Peter's like, well, I don't know. And it went from a no to an I don't know. So then in 2018, I bring it up again, right? I just slowly wear him down to where and this is really my way of avoiding conflict, because what I could do as a wife and as a business partner when he says no is to get angry and to say, no, let's do it my way. instead, I just wear him down over years until I eventually get my way with just patience and opening that tasting room completely changed our business because I knew it would. And I will tell you, I never now say I told you so because that's a horrible thing to say to someone. So I think just learning how to talk to each other with our business is like it's good for marriage. It's good for working out conflict in marriage.
We're going to take a brief pause, but don't go anywhere. There's much more to come with our special guest, Amy Christine. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry, and my guest today is winemaker and master of wine, Amy Christine. Now, Amy, you worked 17 years in the wholesale side of the wine business. What are some of the key lessons you learned about leadership as a salesperson?
Well, leading myself. So as a salesperson, you have to get up every day, make your own schedule. You have a sales goal that your boss wants you to hit it at the end of the month, but they don't tell you how to hit that goal. You have to figure out how to hit that goal. So when I woke up in the morning, it was like, I mean, I was my own boss, even though, I worked for a company and I had bosses. I worked out of my house. The Kermit Lynch, for instance, was in Berkeley. We went up there twice a year for meetings, but no one was standing over my head saying, did you make did you make that appointment today? Did you call Jim Knight at the wine house to try to sell him wine? Did you get in touch with this other person? How are you going to sell $100,000 in wine by the end of the month? And it was, I mean, when I first started in wholesale, what a rude awakening that was. You're fighting for shelf space with other salespeople, but you have to be a nice person as a woman in particular. I hope this doesn't sound cliche, but really, as a woman in particular, you have to not be too pushy, not be too bossy. I learned that a lot of my clients that I was selling wine to, I didn't even need to talk to them about wine. I needed to get to know them as people. It was often about like someone wanting to have a relationship with you. They didn't, not that they didn't care about you had to have a quality product that you were selling, but they had to want to do business with you. And to want to do business with you, you had to be like a kind, morally respectable person. Like, again, not like my boss might say, you have to sell this much Alsatian Pinot Gris this month. But if I'm looking at all of my accounts and no one wants to buy Alsatian Pinot Gris, I'm not going to force that on somebody. So it was like navigating your client, but also navigating your boss to try to please everybody. And I'm such a people pleaser. It's kind of like a perfect job for me in a way. Just the self-flagellation of it too. Like I wasn't good enough today. I have to be better tomorrow. But I was really good at leading myself.
And now you lead corporate wine tasting events for big tech teams, and you teach certification courses for wine professionals. How does your leadership style shift when you're engaging curious corporate teams versus more serious wine students?
Yeah, it's completely different. So when I'm approaching a student, I speak technically and I speak at a really high level, even if they're not quite ready to take on some of the technical information I'm giving them. For instance, if I teach a very introductory level class, WSET level 1, I might get really into the ins and outs of sulfur dioxide and winemaking. They don't need to know that at this point. But I remember taking Spanish in college, and the first day I took Spanish, I walked in and the teacher he did not speak English the entire class. You just had to start catching on. So there was something about speaking at a high level because students want to reach that level. So why not start talking to them at that level, right? Consumers, on the other hand, you cannot do that. If I go to lead a tasting, for instance, for these chief wine officer events that I lead, they're tech organizations that have brought me in to break up business content. So they're having a meeting and they're networking with business content. I come in and I lead a tasting. If I start talking about, I brought up malolactic fermentation earlier, so I'll just say that again: sulfur dioxide, malolactic fermentation, soil types. I mean, people are so bored. You have to engage them and to say, for instance, if I'm teaching people how to taste, like body, acid, alcohol, tannin, palate flavors, I talk about body like, hey, everyone, the body of wine. When we talk about the body of wine, we relate it back to dairy products. So it's skim milk for light body, 2% for medium. I talk at a really basic level where people can understand me. I also make sure to never tell anyone that they're wrong, or which is students, you have to say that's incorrect, what you said, right? But for someone else to say, like I might have a consumer tell me, oh, I really love full bodied wines like Pinot Noir. Now, Pinot Noir is not a full bodied wine, right? But the correct response from that for me is, that's terrific. Tell me what Pinot Noirs you like. You're like trying to ask questions and to bring things out of them. It's kind of the difference between like a push with students and a pull with consumers. And I love doing both. I really love both sides of it. I get to show completely different sides of my personality in both of those.
Now, wine can be really complex, as you said. And I'm sure you have some clients that maybe they're interested in taking their wine knowledge to the next level, but they don't necessarily need to be at that master of wine level. How do you make sure that they're getting what they need without it being overly complex or intimidating?
Yeah, wine can be this intimidating thing, but I think it's that way because wine people have wanted it to be that way. I think that we set a barrier to people. I mean, Michelle, I would love to hear your thoughts on this too, because sometimes I feel like people in the wine business want to sound really smart. And so they start doing stuff like I was mentioning earlier about talking about soil types. I don't think this is the way to approach the type of person that you're talking about. I like to approach those people from a preference point of view. So tell me what wines you enjoy, and then we can talk about why you enjoy those wines. Like, what are the characteristics of those wines? To bring up Pinot Noir, for instance, if someone says, I love Pinot Noir, then I know something about them. I know they like a lighter bodied wine that has fresh acidity, not a lot of tannin, that has like red cherry flavors, and it's just a little bit like light and elegant on its feet. And by knowing that one thing about them, I can recommend other wines to them. I can explain to them why Pinot Noir tastes the way it does, why it has high acidity, because it's grown in cool climates, because we pick it earlier. And I think just taking those little steps might lead somebody to say, oh my gosh, what Amy told me about growing grapes and how, like, why acidity is a certain way in wine. That might make them want to learn more about grape growing instead of like forcing all of the soil climate stuff on them just right from the beginning, kind of ease people into it through preference.
And I'm curious to know, what's the number one question you get from consumers about wine?
People ask me what they should like, which is so funny because some people, I think they don't know what they're supposed to like. And what you're supposed to like is what you like. Like, you're just supposed to have, I often can't tell people, like, I don't want to tell people that you should like Cabernet Sauvignon when you don't. People also ask me all the time how much money they should spend on a bottle of wine. Now, I do have a thought about this, I should say. More than $20, definitely more than $20 on a bottle of wine, and probably less than 100. Like, if you're not let's even say less than 50, somewhere between 20 and $50. If you want to learn something about wine, and you want to learn something about wine that comes from a place or a small winery, right? Also, how long I should age wine is a question I get all the time. And that is entirely dependent on personal preference.
Well, we're going to head into another quick break. And when we return, we'll dive into creativity, writing, and the power of knowing your audience or your tribe. By partnering with Expressions of Leadership, you'll reach an audience of professionals passionate about leadership and growth. For sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm here with Amy Christine, who proves that you can lead passionately in multiple creative arenas, including writing. So, Amy, you're writing a novel, a romantic comedy that's drawn from your own love story, and you're also developing a TV pilot. What inspired you to get into storytelling?
So I'm getting older. I think we're all getting older. And I realized that I left this part of my life behind because I took this accidental journey with my husband into winemaking, which has been an incredible journey. But I am getting to the point in my life where I'm ready to bring it back full circle. Like I'm ready to come around. I've to where I started. I have never stopped writing. I have never stopped telling stories. I tell my story in the tasting room every single day, every day that I'm there. People are asking when I said earlier, people are like, how did you get here? Well, that's what inspired me to start writing this story. Only I didn't want it to be the story is called Wine Slut, which I also have a wine uh brand. I guess we make wine under the label Wine Slut. I wanted it to be the imaginative retelling of my life if I could go back and if I could define that story myself instead of like be like I'm like living my life. I meet Peter. I I end up like starting a winery. But what would have looked like if I was like a sommelier at a Michelin starred restaurant, which is how the novel starts. And Amy's the character in the novel. She's having a really bad day. A really cute winemaker comes in. It's like I'm just kind of like swapping mine and Peter's roles a little bit. It's like looking at our lives really multi-dimensionally and as if this is going to sound so woo woo hoo hoo, but like if we're living time on many different levels, like maybe I took a sliding door and I went this other way. You know that Gwyneth Paltrow movie Sliding Doors? Did you ever see that? And it's like shows two different versions. That's what kind of inspired me to write this. Like when people ask me, how did you get here? And I kind of want to lie sometimes and tell them something far more exciting than what happened. I want to tell them I want to live in a romantic comedy. I'm a little Mindy Kaling that way.
Well, storytelling is a powerful leadership skill and tool. How does storytelling help shape the leader that you want to be in wine and beyond?
I think that the only way that you can be a successful wine brand and the only way that you can lead a successful wine brand is by knowing how to tell your story. And telling your story has to come from a place of, oh God, please forgive the buzzword I'm going to use, but it's just true, of authenticity. It has to be your story. People have to recognize that it's true. So if I start telling my story, mine and Peter's story, by saying, we planted a vineyard and we grow Pinot Noir because we believe that Pinot Noir is the most elegant wine on the planet. Like that is so dull. It has to be, my husband and I fell in love and we decided to start a wine brand because we wanted to work together and to build an empire, our lives together. The storytelling is that it is our, like, that's the brand. That Holus Bolus is our story of kind of how we came about. The octopus we have an octopus on our label. If anybody wants to, like, just if you Google it, you can Google Holus Bolus wine. There's an octopus on our label. The octopus represents our four arms and our four legs. And so even our label kind of tells the story of it's just the two of us. We're two people behind this brand that are kind of moving forward passionately. And I have to explain that to people and also that, like, we're not millionaires, billionaires in this business. Like, we're two scrappy people kind of trying to get by in a lot of ways.
And what's your philosophy around leading your employees in your tasting room?
In our tasting room, so we have a few employees. One of the things that I tell my employees is I never want them to approach a customer and to say, Amy and Peter built this brand. I always want them to come from a place of we, to include themselves in our brand. And so we're not separate, because I see this in tasting rooms sometimes that, yeah, you might see XYZ winemaker started this winery in 2007, and this is where it's gone. Instead of your employee, you want them to be a part of that. And that is my job as a leader to say, to invite them in and to say, you are a we, like you are with us. You are part of our business. We don't exist. We can't exist without them because I can't be the only person to work. I can't work 7 days a week in the tasting room. And so it's important for me, yeah, to invite them to be a we.
Now, Amy, you've said that following a trend is just a bad idea. How do you stay grounded in what you believe in? And how do you lead with confidence and clarity when your perspective may go against the common grain?
Well, oh my gosh, let's say back in between 2005 and maybe 2010, Robert Parker, I hope your audience knows who Robert Parker is. He's a really influential critic who tended to like wines that were bigger and richer and oakier and more alcoholic. Peter and I made wines that way for at least 5 years, maybe the better part of 7 years, because we thought that's what the market wanted and what we were supposed to do. And what was called back in the day, it was called like chasing a score. So we wanted to get 97 points so that we could call some buyers at restaurants and retailers and say, we got 97 points from Robert Parker. Will you buy our wine? Well, what happens is some years you might get 97 points. Other years, Parker or any number of critics might taste your wines. They might taste 40 other wines before they ever taste your wine, and your wine might get 89 points, or it might get 91 points, or they might just be having a bad day, or they might not like your wine. And then you've taken your whole vintage is based on whether someone else, like a critic, likes your wine. What I started realizing around 2010, and this is like what I do in the business. Like Peter does a lot of the winemaking, but I do the leading from the point of view of style, kind of, and how we're making wine. In 2010, I realized, like, Michelle, we were never bringing our wines home to drink, like ever. We were drinking a lot of French and Italian wine, which we still do, but I was like, what is wrong with this picture? We're making wines for someone else. That someone else might not even like our wine. Those consumers are not the consumers that we want because they're drinking wines that we don't even like. So we made a complete stylistic change that year. We started picking earlier so that the wines have more acidity, as I was talking about earlier, and less alcohol. We started using less oak, which saved us money because oak barrels are $1,200 a pop, right? For new barrels. And we suddenly started realizing that we were liking the wines that we made. And then we realized that certain customers were liking the wines that we made. And it was a different customer from what we had before, but it was a customer that we were aligned with. And I realized that we didn't need that other customer. Like there are customers over here for the wines that we want to make and the wines that we enjoy. And I call it like finding your tribe, because let's say there's only 2,000 people in the world that want to drink the wines that we make. Well, I don't really need more than 2,000 people in the world to like the wines that we drink because I don't make that much wine. So who was I trying to please with that? I just was back home visiting my sister, and I hope she doesn't hear this. We had and I wouldn't call it an argument. I would call it a discussion. She does not, I started another label called Wine Slut 3 years ago. She doesn't like the name Wine Slut. She finds it offensive. And she told me that if I changed the name Wine Slut, perhaps I would get more customers. I would find more customers to buy my wine. To which I said, I have another label. It's called Holus Bolus and Hocus Pocus and The Joy Fantastic. Wine Slut is for like, I make it for me and I make it for the people that find it delightful and that want a really affordable $25 bottle of wine and that think the name is like funny and charming and pushing the envelope a little bit. I know that there are people that are offended by that. That's not my customer, right? Not my customer for Wine Slut. My tribe is the person that finds that humorous and that finds me interesting. It's like I just learned I can't make wine. I can't do anything for anybody else. I have to do it for me, and those people will find me. It's like the number one bit of advice that I give to anybody who wants to get into the wine business. I will say one more thing about this. The natural wine movement was a really easy thing. It was a really easy concept that we could have glommed onto. We could have said, we're going to make natural wine, which is wine without any additives, meaning yeast or sulfur dioxide or enzymes, anything that you might add to a wine, because we could have sold more wine if we had told everybody that we were natural winemakers. Now, we do make wine naturally, but I didn't want to be labeled as that. And I also wanted to be able to use sulfur dioxide in the winery to preserve the wines and to have them be ageable. So I not only avoided I avoided going down that road. And I'm telling you, Michelle, it was not easy for a few years there. You would go into a restaurant and the first thing they would say, you make natural wine. And I'd say, well, we don't call it natural wine. And they'd be like, well, we're a natural wine bar. And we had to cross off like half the wine bars in LA. And you just have to be willing to go there, because now what we're starting to see is there's like that the natural wine movement is shifting and it is not what it was. And people don't care as much and they're relying more on their preferences. And I'm so glad that we didn't go with that trend, because then what, I got to switch back to this other way. Like I had to like, just speaking of being a leader in my company, like I had to like trust myself. Those were like not easy decisions to make.
Well, we're going to take one final break. And when we come back, we'll hear about Amy's vision for the future and end with some wisdom and whimsy. Stick with us. We'd love for you to be a part of the Expressions of Leadership community. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm joined by today's guest, the extraordinary Amy Christine, winemaker, educator, and creative. Now, Amy, looking ahead, what's your vision for the future of Holus Bolus, the Joy Fantastic, and Wine Slut?
So the Joy Fantastic going forward will not exist in the same way that it does now. So Peter and I are in the throes of trying to figure out what that is, because the vineyard is going away. The Joy Fantastic wine, that brand, which took us 10 years to build, has to change into something else. And I don't know what that is right now. My vision for Wine Slut is I want to build an empire. It is the TV show, it is the novel, it is the wine brand, it is a podcast, it is a multimedia organization and company. And I realize how insane like, I kind of feel conceited when I'm saying all these things. Like, who do I think I am to do that? But I'm also tired of, I'm 52 years old. I don't want to be small anymore. I want to think big. I might not ever get there, like exactly where I want to be. I don't even know what that looks like, but I am writing the TV show and I am writing the novel. And I did start a little podcast called Wine Slut. I'm not consistent with it, and that's not where I want to be with that. But it really is to me about kind of growing two separate businesses. I call Wine Slut an Amy Christine MW enterprise, right? Because I want it to be this well-rounded, fun thing. Holus Bolus is going to stay the course and be exactly what it is, which is classic grape varieties from classic regions made in a classic style. And that is going to stay there. And that is like our foundation, right? Holus Bolus will be our foundation that I'm able to like stay steady on while I do all these other insane projects and things. So the future is small. Holus Bolus will stay small, and it's big because I want Wine Slut to really grow.
And what legacy do you hope to leave in the wine world?
If by legacy, it's like, I think we think how people remember us. I just want I want people to know how transparent we are, and hope that they say that we were honest in our business and that we were kind in our business. And to me, that means more than anything in the world. I can make all the money in the world, and I would like to make all the money in the world. But on the other side of that, I just want people to say, she was ethical and honest and kind.
And for listeners who want to learn more about you, your wines, or your corporate education work, where should they go?
holisboluswine.com. wineslut.com. You can always reach me through LinkedIn or our website.
And now it's time for our wisdom and whimsy segment of the show. So we're going to start with an advice question. Amy, you've taken on big challenges, moving states for love, starting a business, becoming a master of wine. What have you learned about resilience that you wish more leaders understood?
I think when we think about resilience, we think about staying the course. Like, I'm resilient, so I'm just going to keep going in this direction. For me, resilience is about shape shifting. So, for instance, just with the vineyard, what I was talking about, like this didn't work out. How do we morph and change in order to like find success with that brand in another way, instead of just sticking to our guns and saying no, Joy Fantastic only exists in this regard. Wine Slut is the same way. Like, we hope to start pitching this TV show in February. Now, if the TV show doesn't happen, which is like, I mean, come on, the chances of anything in Hollywood happening these days are like slim to none. What does that look like? And for me, it might take the shape of like a YouTube channel where we're shooting our own scenes and fun things that are happening. But resilience is, yeah, it's not about staying the course. It's about constantly changing, reflecting on what you have done, and moving with the times, moving with your age, moving with I don't need whatever energy you have at the moment.
And now for the fun question. What's the best wine to enjoy while binge watching terrible reality TV? And what show are we pairing with it?
It's champagne always, first of all. It's always champagne. And champagne, really champagne, not Prosecco, not other sparkling wine, but champagne from the region of Champagne in France. And I mean, do we want a specific wine here? Pierre Peters, Blanc de Blanc. Let's just go for it. But we don't want to get too fancy. So we're going non-vintage. We don't need a vintage champagne for reality television. My favorite reality show ever, I mentioned it earlier, is Below Deck. And if you're not watching Below Deck, I don't know how you're living your life or existing in the world. But Below Deck is it's a necessity, and champagne is a necessity. These are both necessities of life, to quote Thomas Jefferson. Yes.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, your creative spark, and a generous pour of leadership insight.
Thank you, Michelle. This was so fun. And I think I told you this before. I've learned that I was a leader through our conversations. Who knew?
And to our audience, thank you for joining Expressions of Leadership. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it. And join us again as we continue exploring stories of people leading with heart, creativity, and purpose. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry. Until then, keep leading in your own unique expression. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.